Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Friends and Fiction. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
And I'm Kristin Harmel.
And this is the Friends and Fiction Show. 4 New York Times bestselling authors. Now, I should stop and remind you that we kind of changed things up in the new year. So just tonight, it's Kristin and I, but the other ladies will be back with us. Anyway, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, 2 tonight, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. On this week's show, Kristin and I are thrilled to welcome bestselling authors Quinn and Janie Chang to discuss their new novel, The Phoenix Crown. The book was just released yesterday, and we can't wait to discuss it with them.
We both loved it. We're so excited to dig in. But first, we want to wish everyone out there a happy Valentine's Day and tell you that we hope you've spent the day with someone you love, or better yet, with a book you love. We all know about falling in love with books, right? Also, we have just a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com. There you will find our show schedule, details on upcoming in-person events, and links to our bookshop.org page, to the Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa page, to our merch store, to our book subscription box, and our weekly email newsletter sign up. In other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction related, anything we offer, and we offer a lot, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
Now let's welcome Quinn and Janie Chang. Quinn is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction. She wrote 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books in the Italian Renaissance before turning to the 20th century with the Alice Network, The Huntress, The Rose Code, and The Diamond Eye. All have been translated into multiple languages. A native of Southern California, Kate attended Boston University, and she and her husband now live in San Diego with 3 rescue dogs.
Janie Chang writes historical fiction, often with a personal connection, drawing from a family history with an astounding 36 generations of recorded genealogy. That is just so incredible. Her first novel, 3 Souls, was a finalist for the British Columbia Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize. And her second novel, Dragon Springs Road, was a Globe and Mail national bestseller. Her third book, The Library of Legends, was nominated for an Evergreen Award and is also a Globe and Mail national bestseller. She's a graduate of the Writers Studio at Simon Fraser University. Born in Taiwan, Janie now lives with her husband on the beautiful Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, Canada. Kate and Janie's new co-written novel, The Phoenix Crown. See, I was just giving them like their team name, yeah. Katie?
Yeah.
Does that work? Yeah. Katie? I don't know. But their new co-written novel, which we are so excited about, The Phoenix Crown, was just released yesterday.
Okay, now let's talk to Kate and Janie instead of about them. Alan, will you bring them on, please?
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's so good to be here.
We are thrilled. We're very glad to have you. So thank you so much. There is a lot to talk about, so let's get started.
Of course, the first question on anybody's mind, if you've ever worked on a book, is how the heck you get 2 authors to collaborate in a novel? And I gotta believe that the arrangement is doubly complex when the subject is historical fiction. Ladies, would you tell us how the partnership came about and how you divided up the work? And were you able to be in the same place physically at any point while you worked on the book? Kate, let's start with you.
Well, I guess you could say for the germ of the idea came from me. I had always been interested in writing a book about the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and the fallout from that, since so much of the city was destroyed in the fires that came after. And the more I was looking at this incredibly rich period, the more that I thought, the thing is, I know what I would write here. I wanted to write an opera singer heroine because there's a famous opera performance the night before the city is destroyed. And I, got my degree actually in studying opera before I, somehow became a historical novelist. So that was easy for me. But I thought what this book really needs is a Chinatown heroine. And I could feel that. It just did, because there is so much in Chinatown of San Francisco's history. And it's such a big part of San Francisco. But it seemed to me like a lot of the fiction of the time didn't cover it except maybe tangentially. And I thought, I wonder, Janie, are you interested in this period of history at all? And I was very glad that she said yes.
So when Kate first approached me about this, I said, well, let me do a quick bit of research on Chinatown during the 1906 earthquake, and let me get back to you. And within like 5 minutes, I was saying, wow, there was a lot going on historically. There was, the Chinese Exclusion Act. There was the fact that all these Chinese were sort of living in this area for protection and safety. And the status of women at that time was very, very difficult. So as we all know, when writing fiction, we want a bit of conflict, some challenges and struggles to make for a good story. And then I said to Kate, but the other thing is, I want to make sure we come out of it still friends.
That was really our primary goal, other than we were going to come out with a book we were proud of, and we were still going to have a friendship that was intact. So we really approached this with a lot of care and respect, really, because, we already not only being friends, but we are huge admirers of each other's work. And we really made sure to approach this with, how are we comfortable working together? How do we want to do this? And we really crafted the book with nothing more than the idea at start of, we're going to have two very different women. You will have your heroine, do what you want with her. I will have my heroine. I have some ideas to do with her, and we will throw them together and we're going to see what happens. And that might sound at first like we didn't plan it out at all. And that wouldn't be true. We planned this within a hair of its life, and Google spreadsheets played a huge amount. And I'd say that's one reason we ended up working together very well, is that Janie and I are both firm believers that a well-organized spreadsheet will fix anything. So this is plotted out quite literally in a Google spreadsheet where, I had all the even chapters, she had all the odd. We alternated back and forth, between the points of view of our two heroines. And in each spreadsheet category, we knew, how much time passes in this chapter, what happens. So that way that if the other person needed to work ahead a little bit, they knew what was going to come before their chapter. And then we would, pretty much as soon as we were done, toss our chapter up in a shared Google Drive so the other person could read it. And that is very vulnerable, I have to say, because, you're writers, you get this. The whole idea of showing someone your rough draft, like when it's just come out of your head onto the page. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think I would rather be seen in my underwear by someone, someone see my rough draft. So that took a little adjustment, but soon it got very exciting because it was almost to feel like we were catching the enthusiasm from each other, and like we were throwing pieces of the story back and forth over a fence. So that was how we did that part. Although there were some in-person meetings as well.
Yes. Tell us about that. You did some research together, right? Right, Janie?
Oh, well, yes, we had a wonderful time in San Francisco doing research. And what happened was we also used a spreadsheet because this was just after COVID. So not everything was open all the time. And we actually had a spreadsheet for which days and which hours various museums and historic houses were open. So we were just trying to cram in as much as we could of sightseeing and also, the actual research part of it. We went to the California Academy of Sciences, where the wonderful librarians there, do we love librarians or what, were hauling cartloads of stuff for us out of their archives. And we were actually looking at, the log entries and diaries of someone that we wanted to write about, and it just sends shivers up your spine. And it saved us from a couple of really stupid mistakes too. And we visited
As it does.
we visited two amazing historic houses where, through friends of friends who knew the curators there, we got to do an after hours behind the scenes tour of these mansions, one of which went on for like 4 hours, Kate. We got to see rooms that they normally do not show the public. And we had not one, but two curators who were geeking out historically. And we were geeking out even more because we are just, such history nerds. So we had a wonderful time. And then here's proof positive that when you're writing historical fiction, you run across a nugget of something and it completely changes you or what you're going to do for the story. And what happened here was we went to see an exhibit by Guo Pei, who's the Chinese couturier, and she does these fabulous fantasy embroidery type outfits. And,
I guarantee you've seen her stuff on like the Met Gala red carpet,
okay.
that kind of thing.
And so by the time we were done, it was like, can we make our heroine Su Ling not just like an embroideress, but like this master embroideress, someone who is like does such exquisite work that then it is able to change her life, So it was, and we had fun. We had a really good time together.
We did a couple of plotting sessions together as well, and an editing session, because I was spending a lot of my time, and still am, in the Pacific Northwest. My husband had a transfer there from the Navy that was less temporary than we thought. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth to the Pac Northwest. So I was close enough to Janie that we were about a 2-hour drive apart.
Perfect.
So therefore, we met a couple of times for plotting sessions. We met a couple of times to actually write or to edit. And at the very final bit, when we had to make our changes, we literally got a hotel room in Vancouver and just holed up for about 3 days.
Wow.
And a whole lot of, we went out for snacks, which we gathered in, like squirrels gathering nuts. Then we retreated to this room and just holed up and did all of our edits. And it was a great way to work. And I am pleased to report that we are still friends by the end of it.
I love that. And you note that in the author's note too, which I also really liked, that was one of the big triumphs of the book, is that your friendship has survived intact, which I love. Yeah. So Kate, I could not help but notice that Gemma is an operatic soprano, and having had the pleasure of hearing you sing myself, I know that you are also a phenomenal singer. So you mentioned in your author's note that Gemma's character was partially inspired by a college voice professor you once had. But I found myself wondering as I was reading if there's a little bit of you in Gemma too, especially when she channels her emotions into her singing. And it felt so personal, the times that she talked about what singing meant to her and what having that voice meant to her. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it felt to you to write a character who had that in common with you?
Well, from the beginning, I knew I wanted this to be an operatic singer for a heroine. And I always have wanted to write one because I have this background. And, since I trained as a voice performance and as an opera singer for 2 degrees when I was at Boston University. And, it really was fun first of all, just because I finally had a heroine who did something that I already knew something about.
Yes.
Because we all know what it's like when your heroine has some sort of profession that is not only something you're completely ignorant of, but something you are not good at all.
Had you not been a sniper in a previous career, Kate? Was that not something you'd done?
Or the heroine is good at something technical and mathy, and I'm not technical and mathy. So it's why did I do this to myself? But here, finally, my student loans were coming out of the corner. Yes, our hour has finally arrived. So it was a lot of fun to write something I knew something about, first of all. And I did base Gemma quite a bit on my wonderful voice professor I had through Boston University through all my years there. And she really did come from a small town in Nebraska, which she called Willa Cather country, where she had this, glorious voice and ended up using that voice to get out of Nebraska and ended up singing all over the great opera houses of Europe as Queen of the Night. Specifically, she was a high coloratura soprano and had a wonderful voice. And she was also this little blonde with these china blue eyes, and still is a wonderful friend of mine, her and her husband, who was her pianist for a long period and a wonderfully sensitive piano player. And they're both wonderful friends of mine. And I asked her for help on, making sure I got any of the details right that I did not have in terms of, what an opera house would have been like, when it's rehearsing and so forth. But yes, there is definitely something of Gemma in me too. Her voice specifically is actually rather like mine. I don't sing quite as high as she did. I never quite got into Queen of the Night territory. I might have gotten there eventually, but has the kind of voice that I do, where it's specifically the Mozart, Strauss, the lighter Italians. It was great to work a lot of my own thoughts about music into it. You do absolutely use your own emotions to fuel it, but you have to do it carefully because singing is very, very physical. And there was one thing that I thought was great, which I had always read about, where there was a singer at this time who actually has a cameo in this book. She was the star of Carmen, which is the performance right before the earthquake. She literally trained her lungs by going for a jog in Central Park in New York. And she would hold her breath as she was jogging and see how many lampposts she could cross. Wow. And that was how she trained her breath control. And I had my heroine do the same thing because let's just say that is a skill that is going to come in handy for her at some point when this whole city starts burning down. But opera singers are wonderfully eccentric. There's all kinds of great grist you can use for that. And I think singers in particular are particularly superstitious because your voice is part of you. It's not an instrument you carry outside of you. So there's very much a little sense of like, is the voice going to cooperate today? What's the voice doing? Like it does kind of feel like you're paying homage in large part to this little temperamental deity in your throat that lives in your throat. And you can't ever be entirely sure what it's going to do.
Well, speaking of that, another piece of Gemma that I found really interesting was that she suffers from these migraines. So, I mean, her voice might be there, but it stops her from being able to perform. And that's something that has really derailed her career. I mean, she's not where she wants to be. I think she's 32, right? Or early 30s or thereabout. And she feels like she shouldn't be in the chorus line anymore, right? And this is kind of one of the things that has stood in her way. Can you talk a little bit about that element of her character and why it felt like something important to address?
Well, I wanted to give her, a reason for why she's not a star when she has a star-making voice. And I really thought it would be an interesting idea to give her some sort of health problem that she struggles with because, anybody with chronic health issues, it's not only the fact that it impinges on your life, it's the fact that there's this frustrated quality of, well-meaning people who think, well, could you just try harder? I'm sure if you just would, take this medication, that'll solve your problems. Yeah. And you just keep thinking, thank you. I've tried that. Yes. Tried that too. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Try harder. I've never thought of that. Thanks so much. And it's the idea that, and I know I do not suffer from migraines myself. I'm very, very fortunate that way, but I have had a number of people, including my editor, who was, said, okay, I can absolutely be here for you for this, for a source, who do suffer from migraines. And, there's no you just power your way through it. Yeah. When you get a really bad migraine. It's like, that's not happening. No. The only thing you could pretty much do is lay down till it goes away. And that is not congruent with having a life as a performer where you need to reliably be able to go on stage when you were being paid to do so. So I thought that would be a good way to, give Gemma an obstacle that she has to struggle with. It's not an obstacle that has a fix-it in place for her. And it's something that, it's not her fault, but it's still something that, people often treat as her fault, or she suffers for it as if it is her fault regardless. And so that's something where she's at the point where she starts to think, okay, I would like a shortcut. It's like if someone will give me a shortcut to the top of this ladder, I have struggled on this ladder for so long because of these migraines, I'm willing to take the shortcut. And that's why A man comes into her life in San Francisco who wants to be a patron of the arts and offers, I can make you a star. And she has the thought of, well, I really wanted to make myself a star. But at some point you have to think, if it's ever going to happen for me, I need to take whatever opportunity I can now. And that's what makes her vulnerable to that offer.
I get that 100%. Yep.
The main characters, both the main characters, Su-Ling and Gemma, are so interesting, and they have a fascinating story arc. But I especially love their friend, Alice Eastwood, who in your novel is, as in real life, was a world famous botanist. How did Alice find her way into the novel?
Oh, good grief. It was like, how could we keep her out of the novel? She was like such an interesting person historically. She threatened to take over the whole book if we let her. And the way we saw it was both Gemma and Su-Ling are young women trying to find some agency, trying to find their way in the world, doing something they love. And here you've got Alice Eastwood, who's, in her early 40s at this time, Kate. And she is the director of the botany department of the California Academy of Sciences. And she's a woman.
I think she's a little older. It's more like late 40s. So she's really the woman who's made it, as it were.
So there she is doing what she wants. And she's she wears these divided skirts, basically trousers at a time when women are not expected to, there are things that are said about women who wear trousers, right? And, she goes off on these adventures looking for plant samples, climbs in the Rockies and so on. So she is sort of like the shining star that lets them know something like this is possible. And of course, all those adventures that Alice had in the middle of the earthquake, they were true. She really did live in a place on Nob Hill that was supposedly not very much damaged at the first round. So she thought, well, things aren't so bad. I'm going to go off to work, gets to work, and the place is on fire because the fire destroyed more of San Francisco than the earthquake did. And to rescue her plant samples, she really does climb up the inner railing of the staircase because the rest of the staircase is not safe. And she starts, handing down 1,500 priceless, unique samples, that were the backbone of this botanical collection. And and before she did that, she hung up her lunch bucket on the horn of a mastodon in the lobby. And so she was just absolutely amazing. And when we got to the California Academy of Sciences, it was like we saw this picture of Alice hanging there in their back offices. And she was wearing a hat with the most extravagant flowers on it. And Kate and I were going, we know who made the flowers for that hat.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's incredible. She just came alive on the page so much, I thought. I mean, it was such a vibrant character, and astounding to just think that she really lived, that she was really somebody who shaped her time and shaped that city. Mm-hmm. Janie, I think you specifically seem to have been drawn to stories that take place in the early part of the 20th century. So, for example, Dragon Springs Road, I believe, begins in 1908, and The Porcelain Moon is set in World War I France. And Kate, of course, your hugely best-selling The Alice Network takes place partially during the First World War. Can you talk a little bit about, and of course, this book is now set between 1906 and where do we pick up? 1911, somewhere a few years after 1906. Can you talk a little bit about what continues to draw you both back to the first 2 decades of the last century, especially when it feels like so many writers, guilty, are passing those years over in favor of writing about the 1940s and beyond? What is it about those first 2 decades that appeals to you?
All right, you're gonna laugh at me when I tell you, but my first 3 novels were set in China, and I just could not bring myself to write about heroines with bound feet. Seriously, I just could not do it. I know Lisa C does that, but I wanted I wanted my heroines to be a little bit more modern. And also, those are the eras, when my parents and their parents grew up. So those were the family stories I heard about all the time. So that particular era and Chinese family and culture and tradition were something that I was really familiar with. But also at the same time, I think that, the early 1900s, before the First World War, was also when the suffragette movement started heating up. And so this became a time when women were starting to ask for more agency, more rights. They could see a different sort of life, a different sort of future for themselves. And again, when we look at people who are caught in a time of social and political transition, we have so much opportunity for story, for change, for struggle. And that's actually why I'm also drawn to it. Plus, the clothes are fabulous, okay?
I would say that too, and just add, if I can be really shallow here, I need to have a historical period with clothes that I like, so I can envision, have fun wearing them vicariously, if not else. And having also, like Kristin, done quite a number of 40s books, it's like, it was so much fun to dip back to this wonderful Gilded Age period, and there's no more little rayon wartime frocks. I had corsets, there was silk velvet and chinchilla trim on dinner gowns, without needing to get into how, fur farming is a really bad thing. We actually approve of it. And, it's like these fabulous, bustle dresses and everything. And I really had fun dressing a character who could have some great turn of the century Gilded Age, like right from Julian Fellowes dresses.
I love it. And it felt visual. Like it was one of those books that you read. Did you feel like that, Mary Kay? That it was one of those things that you read and you could see them. You could see how they looked. You could see what they were wearing.
Yeah. Well, I kept thinking about, I knew obviously that Kate studied opera. And then I was wondering to myself, because Su Ling, the character that Janie writes, is just a next level embroideress. Now, Janie, do you know how to sew?
Ha ha. Can we move on to the next question, please?
About our mutual.
Let's talk about Su Ling a little more, because I love her so much. And she comes with such a unique portion of, American history, the part and time in which she grows up.
Yeah, I kept thinking about our mutual friend, Jennifer Robeson, who wrote The Gown. And she had to learn to embroider when she was writing that book about, it was Queen Elizabeth's wedding gown. And I did an event with her, and she had a sample of the embroidery that she'd gone to do a class. And so I'm sorry, Janie, I think you're maybe a little bit of a slacker.
Okay. But actually, Jen Robson gave me an idea, because both Kate and I, when we started researching about, kingfisher feather jewelry, for people who haven't read the book yet, the phoenix crown refers to the type of crowns that Chinese empresses used to wear. And the most expensive item of ornamentation was not the jewels, but kingfisher feathers, which were cut and inlaid on top of gilt to make like little decorations, because kingfisher feathers are so tiny and the birds were so rare and so on. And the craftsmanship was incredible. Well, it turns out that you can go on Etsy and you can actually buy these vintage/antique little bits of jewelry. So we each got some kingfisher feather hairpins, and Jennifer had put her embroidery sample in a little box.
Right.
So I am also going to be putting my little kingfisher feather hairpins in a little box and taking it on tour. And that's going to be our show and tell for people who come to our book events.
And I actually have one I can show you here. It was within arm's distance of where I'm sitting. This is what a kingfisher feather hairpin would look like.
Oh, that's
You see
awesome.
the vibrancy of the blue. That's a pin that would just go into like a knot of hair. It's a seed pearl. And that's something I did buy, I think, off of, an Etsy dealer somewhere. And, that was a fun discussion to be having with spouses. It's like, we have to, for the sake of research, buy some really beautiful antique jewelry, because it's a tax write-off, right? I mean...
I need this, honey. Yes.
I absolutely do.
Ladies, I think what draws readers like me to both of your works is your believably drawn, strong women characters. And, I underlined a passage in The Phoenix Crown from Alice where she ruminates while thinking about her two friends, Gemma and Su Ling. And she says, it wasn't enough for a woman to be talented or clever or good. That wouldn't save her. And I just stopped and stared at that line for a long time. And I'm wondering, are there real life role models besides Alice who inspired these characters for you all?
I think, I already talked a bit about how my voice teacher inspired this a bit. And I am impressed by anyone who can make a living on the stage. I mean, it is such a chancy, difficult profession. And that is in the modern day when at least we have modern amenities, modern rights to help pave the way to some degree in, forging an independent life. But a woman forging an independent life on a career on the stage with a career and trying to, gain financial security for herself, that is so hard. And I really look back to, any of the women artists and, of the stage, of the opera world from this time and earlier, because what a hard way to make a living, and yet to be devoted to your art and to try to be making great art, but at the same time making a world for yourself where you're safe. And that is really tough. And my hat is off to any woman who managed to do it.
So for Su Ling, I mentioned earlier that she was born into a time of social and political transition. Right. And one of the characters in Chinatown, well, two of them that we wish we could have written more about, was a young woman named Tai Liang, who was rescued from being, basically serfdom, because she was sold as a bonded servant from China into San Francisco. But she eventually grew up, got educated at a missionary school, and helped a woman named Donaldina Cameron, who was known as the White Devil of Chinatown, because Donaldina would go and rescue girls, pull them out of brothals, and bring them into protective custody in her mission house, and find a safe way for them to live. A lot of it involved being legally married to nice Chinese Christian men. But Tai Liang eventually grew up and became, I think, the first Chinese American federal civil servant. She used to be a translator on Angel Island. So she and Su Ling have something in common, which is that they were both born in America. They were like the first generation born in the USA Chinese Americans. So, sort of like with one foot in the expectations of a lot of culture and tradition, and another foot of knowing, just getting that education, seeing that other women, white women, could become teachers, could become nurses, could have careers, have more independence, not be married to someone who would treat her like, okay, concubine number one, here you go,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They really, I was bowled over by the amount of challenges that were faced by women, in San Francisco's Chinatown at that time. I mean, I think it was things I had known intellectually, but to read it and to read it from the perspective of Su Ling, I think just really stopped me at my tracks. I thought that was really beautifully done.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you. And one of the things I really wanted to do through Su Ling was to give other characters in the book, and therefore readers, a view of Chinatown as it was living with ordinary people, because at the time the media portrayed Chinatown as being, filled with dens of iniquities and brothels and opium dens and so on. Yes, there were, but there were also ordinary families raising children, going off to work in the factories and coming home and having dinner, and just ordinary, normal lives. It wasn't as sensational or as exoticized as the contemporary newspapers made it out to be.
Well, and I think you tackled that and addressed that really beautifully. Like, I think you really did give us a good picture of just typical family life there. Another thing that we talked about that we thought you both did really well was your epilogue. You have an unusual epilogue in The Phoenix Crown, which does something many works of historical fiction don't, which is to give us a backward glance at how your characters' lives played out after the story. And the way you did that was so clever. Can you talk a little bit about how that epilogue came to be?
Well, I'm trying to say this without spoilers, but there is a character in the book who is a painter. And we decided, we knew there was going to be an epilogue after the events of the book finished that will give that little glimpse forward to, how people go and how people, what our characters do later on and how their lives turn out. Most historical novels have that. But I thought that, I think I had the idea. I'm not entirely sure, but I kind of thought, okay, it was me. I had the thought because we'd been to a number of museums in San Francisco, and you see these museum catalogs that will give you information on the work that you're looking at. And I thought, well, I wonder if our painter character, as an indication, because it was a little bit of a plot thread through the book too, is how will this painter ever begin to work again in a serious way? I thought, why not do a sort of retrospective of this painter's work later in life and show through paintings that were done exactly how each of the characters turned out. And so rather than have a scene where you look at the painters or you look at the characters and see where they all are, there's a painting of each of the characters that have survived and have thrived by the end. And you see a little snapshot, as it were, of their life in that time. And that allowed us not only to look at the characters, but also at San Francisco, because, the very last painting is a landscape of San Francisco as it is rebuilt. And I don't know, I kind of ran with it and just said, well, do you think this would work? And Janie liked it. So we ended up keeping that in there. But it was a lot of fun in there because it was a real visual way to get that, scene of how everybody has done when the final events of the book are finished.
Yeah, it was just the perfect ending, honestly.
Yeah, I'm highly disappointed neither of you learned to paint. So, I mean, you painted it.
Yeah, no,
you painted it with kids.
Yeah, that's the limit of what I can do.
Yeah, and she's as Kristin mentioned before, she's not a sharpshooter either.
Or a code breaker or anything like that.
As far as we know, Janie. As far as we know, right?
Okay, Kate and Janie, thank you. You're gonna stick around, but we have a couple of quick announcements.
Yeah, for all of you watching and listening, now that you've had the pleasure of meeting Kate and Janie, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of The Phoenix Crown. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll be getting it at a discount and helping to fund our show, all while supporting our beloved independent booksellers nationwide.
And we also want to remind you to follow us on Instagram and join our Facebook group that's nearly 250,000 members strong. When you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay abreast of upcoming Friends and Fiction show guests, in-person events. You can shop our merch store, order our book subscription box, and sign up for our weekly email newsletter, which is chock full of bonus content.
To all of our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you love the Friends and Fiction show, we hope you will leave a rating or review and remember to tell a friend. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can catch all our back episodes, more than 200 of them, and you'll never miss a thing. And when you subscribe to our podcast, you can listen in your car, while you're cleaning, while you're grocery shopping, while you're working out, all the things that I'm woefully behind on this week. So it is like having Friends and Fiction in your pocket. You can take us with you wherever you go.
That's right. Be sure to tune in next week for our live show for this month of February. All for Friends and Fiction hosts and founders. That's a lot of.
It is.
Patti, Kristy, Kristin, and I will welcome our featured author for the month of February, Tia Williams, to discuss her new novel, The Friends and Fiction February Pick of the Month, a love song for Ricky Lake. That show will air live on the Friends and Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then it'll be posted to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, February 23rd.
That was a tongue twister of a paragraph, Mary Kay. Lots and lots of F's. Yes. Before we let you go, Kate and Janie, I know you've both got a lot coming up this year. Can you fill us and our viewers in on what's coming next for you? So, Kate, I know you have the Briar Club coming in July. And to those of you out there who have not seen the gorgeous cover yet, I hope you will take a moment to look for it because it is so pretty. I love it. So, Kate, can you tell us a little bit about the Briar Club?
Yes, I decided I was being a real slacker, and one book a year wasn't enough. So I put out 2 this year in 2024. That seemed like a good idea at the time. That's all I can say. Some of it's beyond my control, honestly. But it is, the Briar Club is all about an all-female boarding house in Washington, D.C. in the early 1950s. And therefore, it is a big deep dive into, the whole era that has McCarthyism, the Red Scare, the Lavender Scare, the Korean War, the Cold War, the end of the Women's World War II baseball leagues. There's so much there, so much grist. I can't wait for this book to hit shelves on July 9th.
That's awesome. And now, Kate, you just live on the road, right? There's no home anymore because you're just going to be on book tour for the entire year.
Yeah, that's the idea. Although, fortunately, I already have T.L. Williams' new book on my Kindle to keep me company at the airport. So I'm very excited.
Fantastic. How about you, Janie? What's up next for you?
Well, I think I mentioned that yesterday I mailed in my draft of my next novel. It's called The Fourth Princess, and it will come out sometime in 2025. And it is a Gothic novel set in pre-war Shanghai because I've always loved Gothic novels. And like Kate, with the Phoenix Crown, I wanted to take it easy a little bit. And I've already done so much research on that era of Shanghai. I was hoping not to have to do too much and have some fun with it. So it is the story of an American woman and a young Chinese woman, and they both move into this incredible mansion. The American woman is married to a millionaire, and the Chinese woman is her translator / hired companion, and there are dark secrets to be uncovered.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. All right, Janie, finally, how can readers connect with both of you on the road and online in the coming weeks? How can we find you?
Oh my. So on both of our web pages, we have an events page, which we're keeping up to date as quickly as we know when the RSVP registration links come in. So we've got a major tour that we're on this week that takes us from coast to coast. And then we have our Canadian tour, which is the last week of February. And I think Kate's basically on the road for all 3 weeks, right?
Yep, unfortunately. But also fortunately, because I get to meet so many people on the road, that is worth any number of room service club salads and very limp Caesar salads. Absolutely.
We laugh because we know. We've all been there. Yes.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons we decided to write a book together, is so we could book tour together and have more fun together and not have to trudge through airports on our own.
Oh, I love that.
Teamwork is the dream work, makes the dream work, right?
Yeah.
And we know that on Friends in Fiction. Anyway, Thank you, Kate and Janie, for being with us on Friends in Fiction. Thanks to all of you out there for being with us, and we will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.